Tamil Nadu's Finance Minister Palanivel Thiagarajan is joining us for an exclusive interview. And in fact, we have a lot of important questions lined up for them. We'll dive into them straight away. Hello, sir. I hope you're doing good. So I would like to start with the center-state relationship. It's been almost 1 year since the DMK government came to power. So how do you see the relationship is going on between the government of Tamil Nadu and the center so far?
For any country of this size or any economy of this size, we are an unduly centralized constitution at the outset. Right? And there was a historic reason for it. They were creating a country where there had never been a country. So they want to empower. But even in the constitution they wrote India is a union of states. And that the two levels of government are parallel, not one above and below the other. But in effect, a lot of the powers were left with the union. It has become much more so in the last 8 years with the union government effectively, both constitutionally and extra-constitutionally in many ways, grabbing power from the states. This is in direct contrast, 180 degrees opposite, night and day, black and white opposite to the views expressed by now Honorable Prime Minister Shri Modi when he was Honorable Chief Minister of Gujarat. Everything he said then, it's exactly the opposite that he's doing now. At some level it's not surprising because there's the old adage in politics, where I stand depends on where I sit. So wherever he sat, he advocated more power to him wherever he sat. At some other level, this is even more clear because there's a famous economist, I forget his name, who used to run the NIPFP in Delhi, who said everybody wants devolution but only to their level of government. So when he was in the state, he wanted devolution. If he had been in the panchayat, he would have wanted devolution there. Now that he sits in Delhi, he says, let everything be with me. So this is not a Tamil Nadu problem, it's not a DMK problem, it's a countrywide problem. It is an exercise that is only destined to end in failure.
Do you think the BJP ruled states and the non-BJP ruled states, both of them are treated equally when it comes to shared revenues and fund allocations?
I don't think there's any politics in that. I think there are politics in other ways, in the way they appoint governors and the way they do things. Of course, the allocations are based on mathematical formulae and using the Finance Commission's recommendation. So I don't want to inject politics into that. I will ask a fundamental question. If all states' rights are being eaten away, are being captured, are being forced taken, how is it that only the non-BJP states are protesting it? What has happened to the BJP state chief ministers and administrations? Have they sacrificed the interests of their people and their states at the altar of party loyalty? That's really the question. And the answer is very obviously yes.
After a recently held COVID meeting, Prime Minister Narendra Modi particularly mentioned the names of non-BJP ruled states, including Tamil Nadu, and asked them to reduce VAT on fuel prices. In fact, he told that these states should reduce the VAT on fuel prices, for the benefit of their people. So, how do you see this particular act from the Prime Minister?
Tamil Nadu cut the prices before the union government did. When he says Tamil Nadu didn't cut, what does that mean? Cut the taxes. Second, now the highest charging state in India is Madhya Pradesh. Who rules Madhya Pradesh? BJP, right? How come he didn't notice that BJP had not cut? Third, nowhere in the constitution does it say just because the union cuts, the state should cut. There's not one synchronized policy, right? It's supposed to be each elected government does what's right in its understanding. Fourth, the union government under the same Prime Minister raised the petrol and diesel excise and then cess and surcharge threefold and tenfold. At that time, even our predecessors, the ADMK, who were in office for 7 years before us when the overlap with the BJP government, only raised it about 50 or 60%. How is it fair that when you raise it 10 times, you don't call us, you don't ask us, you don't synchronize with us, you don't take an input, you don't take anything? Our predecessors only raised it half or, 2/3. Then when you cut, who made you the arbitrator of all that is good and fair that we have to cut just because you cut? When you rise by yourself. When you cut, you say, you also cut with me. How does it make any sense? It's completely, it is so meaningless that it's almost not worth discussing.
You've been consistently urging the central government to merge cesses and surcharges with the basic rates of tax. Do you think it's against cooperative federalism that the central government is not doing it, and are states actually losing revenue because of it?
Of course, it's against to go from 6 or 7% of all revenues coming in cess and surcharge to over 20%. The fundamental problem with this union government is it thinks it knows everything, it thinks it should do everything, it thinks it can run everything and control everybody. Of course, that's just wrong. I mean, even a basic analysis says it's not doable. But because they keep running elections, they keep thinking that election mandate equals good administration. It's not. So this will end badly. Keep the interview. One day this will end badly because you keep on increasing authority and money and keep on giving less and less outcomes. And you're doomed to give less outcomes. Why are you doomed? Because there's no way without democracy, without discussion, without input, without execution devolved down to the local bodies and the states, you cannot succeed. It is written black and white.
Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, during a recent visit to Tamil Nadu, has told that accusations of centre not giving enough shares to the state of Tamil Nadu is arising because there is no understanding of the taxation principle. So, how do you see this particular comment from the Finance Minister herself?
Yeah, that's not what I read about her statement. I think if she had said that, I don't think she means that, because if there's anybody who doesn't understand the taxation principles, it's the union government, right? Its revenues from regressive indirect taxes have gone up, and its revenues from progressive direct taxes, that means fare that I take from those who can afford to pay, have gone down by 7 or 8% in the 8 years they've been in power. Clearly, that is a rich man's suit boot sarkar, as somebody said. It is intended to support rich people and against poor and middle class people. So if there's anybody who doesn't understand tax policy or doesn't have a heartfelt tax policy, it is whichever government, and I'm not even saying this finance minister, this was done previous finance ministers also. In the last 8 years, there have been 3 or 4 finance ministers. But the reverse is what she said. I read, maybe, and again, all the press reports many things, so I don't want to comment. But I agree with one thing she said, that GST dues or payments are not only to Tamil Nadu, they're across all states. I agree. And she said something about bringing petrol, diesel into GST, but I'm not sure exactly what she said, so I won't comment on that. But I didn't know she came till after she came. I didn't know she was coming. And I didn't realize she was staying that long, because otherwise I would have tried to just meet her. Just a courtesy visit, that's all. But by the time I realized she had come and gone. So you would have liked to meet her? Just a courtesy visit. She come to Chennai, that's all. Yeah.
In fact, the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, she also told that the people of Tamil Nadu should vote for BJP if they want their problems to be solved. So as a DMK MLA and as a minister from the DMK cabinet, how do you see this comment?
Yeah, I mean, she's entitled to her view. But I think the people of Tamil Nadu have shown consistently that BJP is about the nota level. It'll stay there. The people of Tamil Nadu have relatively high education, relatively emotional connect of all, harmonious communities. Tamil Nadu is where Tamil Nadu is. People can advise as they see fit. The voters are smart enough to vote as they know better.
While releasing a white paper on the Tamil Nadu's economic condition when the DMK came to power, you told that the total debt stands at 5.7 lakh crores. So it's been 1 year since the DMK government assumed charge, and what signs of change are we starting to see?
Debt. You cannot see the debt as an absolute number. You have to see the debt as a ratio of GSDP or GDP. Or you have to see this year's deficit as a ratio of this year's budget, right? Or this year's GDP. If it's revenue deficit, you have to take it as overall revenues. If it's fiscal deficit, you have to take it as a percentage of GSDP. So in that sense, nobody ever lowers the net debt. It's very, very rare. The net debt meaning after repaying old dues and borrowing new, whatever the net debt is, it will keep increasing every year for most countries, rich and poor. It's very rare to have surplus countries that keep paying it back. In fact, if you study macroeconomics, because one side is savings and wealth, which is growing all the time, and the other side is borrowings, which is only corporates and governments. Effectively, the total debt in the world keeps increasing every year because the total assets keep increasing, and they have to balance. The money has to be parked somewhere. The real issue is what is the debt to GDP or debt to GSDP. More importantly, what is the interest to revenue, or what is the percentage that you paid just to cover your debt. And in the long term, is this affecting your ability to invest and grow your economy? So back in 2016 in my maiden speech, I made the observation that in the RBI analytics, the state of state finances, they had commented that Tamil Nadu once used to be a model state. And what are the two characteristics? They said, you borrow mostly to invest, not to finance revenue deficits. And you have a very low interest to revenue ratio. Those are characteristics of well-managed state finances. And it said, now these have not been followed the last couple of years, and if it continues on this trend, it's going to be bad for you for future growth. It makes sense, right? The more I invest, the more growth I'll get. The less I invest, the less growth I'll get. All things else being equal. So in that sense, the real problem with the ADMK government of the last 7 years, 2014 to 2021, the last 7 years of their 10-year term, as long as the former Chief Minister, Ms. Jayalalitha, was alive and controlled, it was okay. Once she lost control because she went to jail in Parpanagrahara and all that, then things started going down the tubes. How badly? The interest to revenue ratio went from 11 paisa for every rupee to 21 paisa for every rupee. That means 10% of every future rupee of revenue was added to interest. And the debt to GDP ratio, which had fallen to as low as 16% or 16.5%, went up to 26 or 26.5%. That happened in a really short time, in 7 years. Right? But now we have discovered after coming to office how bad and rotten the system was. And with the full support of the Chief Minister, we are on track. If you saw not just the budget, but the medium-term fiscal plan that I put at the end of the budget, at a conservative estimate, by the year 24-25, we'll be almost revenue neutral. I'm fairly confident we'll beat that. That means we'll come into compliance, most likely in the year 24-25, in zero revenue deficit and under 3% fiscal deficit. If that is the case, that means that in 3 years, 21, 22, 22, 23, 23, 24, in 3 years we will have solved the decay of 7 years. That's a remarkable achievement.
Sir, the Chief Minister has been very focused on bringing investments to
Yeah.
Tamil Nadu. In fact, he traveled to Dubai, and we are hearing that he will be going to America and some other countries also in the next coming months. So how important is it at this point in time to bring a lot of investments to state?
Ultimate importance, right? Everything else we do is to create the atmosphere and the environment for investment that creates growth and jobs. That's it. The Chief Minister takes the lead and tries to attract, and we build a platform that the Chief Minister can be proud to show off and say, look, we are a stable, we always were a high per capita income, high education, high English-speaking workforce, high connectivity, better infrastructure, more coastline, better undersea cable connectivity for internet. We already had all those things. Now we can show good administration and state finances under control. Why is it important that state finances should be under control for an investor? Because that gives them the confidence that we are not going to be shaky, we ourselves are not going to be at the whims and fancies on the market, and we will not be crowding out borrowing opportunities for private entrepreneurs, because the state itself needs to suck in so much extra borrowing every year. So it's important that we provide that stability and that professionalism and those results.
Certain political commentators, they've been telling that DMK has made promises such as the old pension scheme thing and providing 1,000 rupees to the housewives. So they're telling that these kind of schemes are not implementable, and they're telling that the DMK has made fake promises. So as a finance minister, do you see these schemes being implemented in the future? Can we expect these schemes to be implemented? How is the financial condition as far as these schemes are concerned, and why are they to be implemented?
Yeah, listen, the Chief Minister tells us what to do, and we try to do it to the best of our ability. He has been very clear about his views, and that we are all working towards that. I am 100% comfortable that we will be able to do the 1,000 rupees not to every person, but to every deserving person. Like my family doesn't deserve it. I don't think your family deserves to get. You have a decent job, and so why should we really worry about giving you 1,000 rupees extra a month? But to every person whose life is meaningfully affected and the social justice value of that payment is high, then we want to do that, right? You know, it is slightly different. Let me put it another way. When we announced, CM announced and committed the 4,000 rupees per ration card, our data suggests that a lot of it, like hundreds of crores of it, went to people who really didn't need the money because they had never bought a ration product before in their lives, never after. They just came for the money. So either it's completely fake, or well-to-do people who don't need subsidy don't need the 4,000. But we don't mind that because it was creating stimulus during a downturn in the economy. But we do mind if we end up paying, subsistence money or slightly, life improvement money to people whose life it doesn't improve, right? If you're above 5 lakhs, why should you get another 1,000 or 12,000? You know what I mean? So I don't know. There's some number, there's some approach, there's some methodology. But within the realms of whatever the broader decision is made about where the kind of eligibility is. Surely some people are not eligible, right? My family is not eligible. My wife should not be eligible. So once we do that, I'm 100% comfortable we'll get that done. The problem with the pension that I mentioned in the assembly, first of all, it was a bit disappointing to me that people that I thought were senior political leaders started making statements and giving press conferences that were completely random, obtuse, right? Brainless. I didn't say anywhere in the assembly that anything about money or cost or feasibility or anything. They start giving press statements. He says, oh, it's not feasible because of money. And I never said anything. 100% of the newspapers reported it accurately. Only a couple of magazines and TV channels that wanted to twist the story put out all kinds of fake news that I had not said. And then senior party leaders start issuing statements, both coalition and opposition, and giving press conference based on fake news. Right? I mean, it's disheartening at some level. The only point I made, which I'll make again, is that this notion that you can convert what is a defined contribution pension, which is the system since 2004 in all states, back into a defined benefit pension, which is the old system before 2003, has a serious legal problem. Serious legal problem. Because a defined benefit pension has no asset in any individual's name. It just has a claim that every individual has against the future cash flows of the government of Tamil Nadu, because we are not accruing anything for it. We are a cash accounting entity. Government of India, Government of Tamil Nadu, Government of Karnataka, everybody. So whatever liability is for the government to pay pensions in the future, 50% of your final salary, all that stuff, is only on paper liability. There's no asset against it, right? It's just a liability. And that liability is subject to all kinds of risk. Should you get dismissed for corruption, you can have a pension withheld. Should you have, a serious case, I don't know, murder or something. There's many ways that pension can be disqualified, because it's just a liability, it's just a commitment, and that commitment comes with certain legal terms. It's not an open-ended commitment. Whereas if you go to a defined contribution pension, from the first day that any money is put into it, that is the employee's contribution up to 10% of their salary and the government's match up to whatever they put, this money is in what's called a segregated account. It's not just held in one pot. Your pension account is different than my pension account because we're putting in different amounts. Not all of us are putting in 10%. More than that, once it goes into a professionally managed system like the National Pension Scheme, NPS, which all states except West Bengal and Tamil Nadu are in, the employees get to pick which asset manager, and within which asset manager, which actual bond class or which fund class they get to pick. So every single account will have a different amount of money at every point in time. Even if you put in the same amount, you will have a different amount. And many people will not put in the same amount. So if I have, let's say, 10 million segregated accounts, in the case of Tamil Nadu, there are 6 million segregated accounts. There's a very high likelihood that if they were in the NPS, not even 10 of them would have the same number. Everyone would be different, right? Now, if all of a sudden you want to go back to defined benefit and you call the NPS and say, dissolve all these accounts, gather up all the money together and send it back to me. You see any legal problem with that? Of course there's a legal problem. It's like you have 10 lakhs, I have 30 lakhs. We both have to dissolve our account and it has to go to the state as revenue. And the state owes you and me equally after that. Why should I give up 30 lakhs for your 10 lakhs? You know, in English it's called a perfected interest. That means even if you tomorrow get arrested for murder or dismissed for corruption or whatever, your account is your account. The government can never take it back, not even 1 paisa. This is a huge legal problem. I only pointed out that. I never said about the cost, I never said about the timing, I never said about the capability to fund. I never said anything about that. So I was more than a little disappointed that random statements were issued by people who ought to know better, who ought to read. I mean, these days we broadcast, right? They could have, even if they couldn't read because of old age or something, they could have at least listened to the kind of speech to know that I never said anything about viability or timing or anything, right?
Last but not the least, I want to talk to you about the language controversy, especially the Hindi imposition controversy that often erupts in the state of Tamil Nadu. I don't want to take names of any particular political leader or a particular political statement, but how do you see this Hindi imposition controversy that often erupts in Tamil Nadu, and what's your general view as far as language policies are concerned?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've already explained clearly why it makes no sense to have a 3-language formula. And most people agree that you must start with your mother tongue. So the real question is, should you stop with the second language, and if so, what is the second language? And I think it's been explained beyond any doubt that you clearly want a language that is easily, that adds value to your movement and communications and job around the world. And that's much more English than anything else. In fact, as I've said many times before, asking for a 3-language formula is actually saying that the Hindi belt will have a 1-language formula. They're not capable of producing schools good enough to generate English in all of them. And the rest of the country should have native for them, English to speak to the rest of the world, and Hindi to speak to the people who cannot learn English because they cannot afford a 2-language formula. So it's really 1-language formula for the Hindi belt and 3-language formula for all those who are not the Hindi belt, which is the periphery and so forth. How is that a fair outcome in a democracy? So again, these are all inane arguments, right? They're beyond, like anybody with half a sense of logic, this language issue, this, state should synchronize cuts. These are not worth discussing. These are just distractions meant to take away from failing economic performance of the union government.
So what will be the focus of the Tamil Nadu Finance Ministry for this current financial year? What are we going to work on?
We expect fiscal federalism. We expect cutback of cess and surcharge. We expect, respectful and thoughtful consideration and input when we, treatment when we give input. We expect discussion and joint framing when they set up new schemes. And we expect consistency. They can't do this trick of, first year they'll say it's a centrally sponsored scheme, do 80% them, 20% us. Next year they'll say, no, it's 50-50. Third year they'll say, no, we give 20, you put 80. Fourth year they'll say, we give 0, you do 100, but you have to continue the scheme because you already invested so much. This is like a kind of, death by 1,000 cuts, where they effectively dictate your budget using their seed money, right? Instead of that, we should all sit together and figure out what is the right way, and may vary state to state or whatever it is, right? So just mutual respect, courtesy, consideration, and not trying to tread on the independence of states, who are equally validly elected by the people. It's not like only the Prime Minister and this thing were elected, right? The rest of us also elected. And it's not as if the BJP won like 90% vote share or anything, right? They won 37% vote share. Coalition partners altogether was 40-something, still less than 50, right? So more people voted for others than voted for the entire BJP coalition around the country, right? Why shouldn't other people have a voice? You run, no problem. But listen to everybody and run. Discuss with everybody. Devolve to everybody. Then do it. That will succeed, right? This will not.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.